So I split off and at 26 years old decided to start a local bookkeeping tax practice and just hang my own shingle. So I picked up a couple local outfitters, a rafting outfitter as well as an ATV outfitter, and I always wanted to, alongside other different businesses, I just wanted to be able to help them grow, profit, generate more wealth for themselves, their owners, as well as like generate additional income for employees and just get outside of the grind that small businesses have.
Episode 1070, Zeb Smith on making the business behind the outdoor adventure successful.
You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to bring you the inspiration and motivation you need to get started in the outdoors or to keep you moving if you're already there. Now here's your host, Curt Linville.
Hi friends, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Thanks for joining in today. I have to give some explanation about today's program because this is probably different than anything that we've done in the past. And after 10 years and over 1,000 episodes, you might be saying, what on earth? What could be different? Today, we're going to lean into not just adventure sports, but a little bit more into the backstory behind the business of adventure. We're talking about outfitting. We're talking about guiding. We're talking about how to make a business work if you've ever wanted to be an outfitter or a guide. Today's show is going to be a lot about that. I have Zeb Smith with us today, and Zeb is a consultant who consults with outfitters all across the nation, and he has been doing this since all the way back in 2016, and he has carved out a niche business that is just super fascinating where he helps adventure outfitters and guides and folks like that who want to succeed in the outdoor industry in business to actually succeed in the outdoor industry in business, which is hard to do. It's very, very common for people to start a business, run it for a year or two, and then just have to drop out. But Zeb focuses on how to bring people together and turn a lifelong dream into a lifelong business. So, Zeb, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Curtis. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I think that, we talk about adventure sports a lot, and I think that sometimes it's cool to hear a little bit more about the business side behind all the fun. And there is the outdoor industry is massive. It really is a huge business. But what you are doing is not the huge business side. What you're doing is helping people that have the small businesses to actually succeed at it. And I love that. That's something I think that's very necessary.
Well, thank you, sir. Yeah, it's, been working within the industry for the last decade has really, transformed and morphed, just even myself and my own personal growth. And, born and raised in Heartbeat outdoor adventure, Gunnison, Colorado industry, and like being able to apply that and do it professionally and help so many of the outfitters and the guides that I grew up with succeed. It's been very impactful and very powerful and humbling in many different ways. But I'm glad to have found this and carved it out and made it lucrative to support me, my family, and all the outfitters that we work with as well.
Well, you've not only been consulting for quite a while now and helping people out, you also are a guest speaker at National and State Outfitter Association gatherings. You have a peer group that you facilitate that you call the Eddy that allows outfitters to get together and learn from each other and support each other, doing a lot for the industry. And I'm behind you. I like what you're up to.
Thank you.
So, let's see. For starters, you're a CPA by trade, but you've been a consultant now for a long, long time. So, describe how that transition happened from being a public accountant all the way back from 2011, I guess. How did this transition happen into Zebulon LLC, which is what you call your consulting firm?
Yeah, no, great question. So I graduated college and got my CPA, hired on a public accounting firm in 2011, got my credentials shortly thereafter, and did the big corporate thing for just a couple of years, and that was out in Denver at like a regional public accounting firm. I really just got tired of working on the Front Range and wanted to be back to the West Slope. So I took a list of all the different West Slope towns. As an accountant, being a numbers type of person, dropped off every town that was like less than 10,000 in population and looked at other important stats like public land access, girl to guy ratio, growth opportunities, everything that like a 24-year-old would want, right? So I moved to Durango, worked public accounting there for a couple of years for a local firm, and just didn't feel like I was applying my talents in a way that were meaningful and that were really helping people. So I split off and at 26 years old decided to start a local bookkeeping tax practice and just hang my own shingle. So I picked up a couple of local outfitters, a rafting outfitter as well as an ATV outfitter, and I always wanted to alongside other different businesses, I just wanted to be able to help them grow, profit, generate more wealth for themselves, their owners, as well as like generate additional income for employees and just get outside of the grind that small businesses have. Well, the outfitters that I picked up with, they were receptive to the consulting that I wanted to do beyond just the bookkeeping and tax work. And in just the first couple seasons, we had some really strong bang up results with growing their operations and growing their outfits. So I related to them. The outdoors is a big piece of my heart. The family values are all the kind of there. I spoke the language, and I wasn't just the stuffy old accountant that everybody was super familiar with. So at that point, I decided to go ahead and niche within the industry. I worked with a whole bunch of other different industries at that point, and I wanted to niche in the outfitting scene for those reasons I just mentioned. And that's when I started speaking at conferences. I picked up a webinar at America Outdoors, did one of their conference presentations. Then the pandemic hit, right? And I got online, provided a bunch of videos and free resources to help people get through the pandemic, from PPP, consult efforts to pricing to gross profit margin, a whole bunch of things just to give them knowledge and tools and free resources to get through the pandemic scare. And then zoom forward now, the firm itself, we've been niched specifically in the industry since 2019. We've serviced probably close to 50 outfitters all across the nation. Currently have about a dozen on retainer right now. Our three-prong effort is to help outfitters work smart, have fun, make money. So I myself am a CPA. My staff is entirely CPAs or MBAs. So that's the work smart component. We apply all of our strengths and talents into helping outfitters as well as we can at every capacity that we can. Have fun. Outfitters are a group that always want to have fun. So if we're not having fun in everything we're doing, we're not doing our job right. So we make sure that our work experience is enjoyable. We're encouraging them and supporting them on hitting their targets and their goals. And we've also created the Eddie Peer Group, which is outfit owners and managers all across the nation get together and discuss business strategies and tactics, and basically getting them off the island so they don't have to feel like they're running independent and running out in this really rural scene that's usually lacking in support and for outfitters in an online environment surrounded by other operators. So we have a curriculum, we do data shares, we have a lot of airtime where they can connect and talk about key issues, and that's our peer group. And then, of course, everything we do helps outfitters make more money. Being a CPA and being a financial guy, if we're not helping them grow their bottom line, we're not doing what we need to be doing. And the bottom line is what funds everything else. So,
Okay, that's super cool. Now that we know what it is you do, let's rewind a little bit and paint the picture of who it is that you might be helping. So I've talked to a lot of people over the years who they want to do what they love, right? And everybody can relate to this. You have the job. Okay, so I have the job, but I have the hobby that I love. I want to do the hobby all the time, but I can't because I have to do the job. And then people start thinking, what if somehow I could make the hobby the job? I could make the hobby the business. And as exciting as that sounds, I've talked to several people who have said, never do that because you'll learn to hate what you love. And it's really a negative viewpoint, but I think part of the reason that happens is because they don't have someone like you to help them sort it all out. So here's an example: a car mechanic. So there's a shade tree car mechanic who loves working on cars, and a real gearhead who says, "Boy, wouldn't it be fun to just do this all the time and do this for other people and make a lot of money?" So, hang out a shingle, start bringing in some revenue. You get some people bringing you cars to work on, and then at some point, someone says, "Well, how's the business doing?" And the answer is, "Well, there's some money in the checking account."
Yep.
I don't know really if we're growing. I don't know what our taxes are going to be like this year, and I don't know if we're getting more clients or fewer clients than a year ago, and I don't know if we're actually being efficient and productive, and I don't know if we're profitable. And I think that's what kills so many businesses, new businesses that are trying to live the dream. And here's the hard part of it, Zeb. Let's say you want to be a raft guide. You're spending your time on the river guiding, right? But somewhere back behind all of the guiding that you're doing on the river, you have to run a business. You have to take care of the accounting. You have to take care of the taxes. You got to take care of employees. You got to take care of human resource laws and issues. You've got to take care of keeping the books. You've got to find out whether or not you're growing and promoting the business correctly. Their websites, their marketing campaigns, and everybody sticks out their hand. And what I mean by that is that when you start a business, everyone wants to help. Everyone wants to help for a fee. And I mean, it's just tough. It is so hard to start a small business. And if you're focusing on working on the car, you don't even have time to answer the phone when it rings. So you get stretched so thin. I think this might be the reason why I've heard people say, don't try to make a business out of what you love. But I'm not sure that that's good advice. I think you can successfully make a business out of what you love. You just have to do it the right way.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's really what we want to explore right now, because we have thousands and thousands and thousands of listeners out there who love adventure sports, and many of which have probably dreamed of trying to make an innovative business out of what they love doing in adventurous ways. So just off the top of your head, let's imagine that you're talking to someone who's not made the leap yet. They have an idea, but they've not started the business. What would be some early advice you may offer to them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, if anybody hasn't ever gone through the element of owning and being a leader within a business in that capacity, there's incredible resources at like your local SBDCs, especially if you're in a rural area, which most outfitting is going to be in, right? So, there's some immediate free information you can get from those sources. If you're looking to get into like the adventure sports scene specifically, and that's, I think, that's what we're here to talk about. There are like state level associations as well as like national level associations who are aware of outfits who are up for sale or may want to be going through like a transitionary period. So this time right now is actually really exciting in the outfitting scene, because so many of the existing outfitters, whether it be rafting outfitters or hiking outfitters, you pretty much name it, but like there was the OGs that really came into the industry in like that 70, 80, 90 time period. And, they've had their time with owning the business, and a lot of them are wanting to transition out at this point. So if you're hungry and if you want to step into it within within this time period, it's a prime time to purchase an existing outfit. So like America Outdoors is a national association. We do a lot of work with them. They usually have a pretty good sense for like their membership. In Colorado here, I'm pretty closely tied with like the Colorado River Outfitters Association for people that want to be in the rafting scene. But what I would encourage you to do is to think about, what channel and what avenue of adventure, of activity do you want to get after? Get onto Google, do a search. AI is incredible for this kind of stuff. And in terms of saying, like, where are the associations? And those associations will know who's trying to sell. And then you got to go through like the purchasing and the brokering and all that kind of stuff to make those purchases.
Permits, licenses.
Yeah.
certifications. There's a lot.
Yeah,
There's a
and that
lot.
could be an eye-opening experience too to try and like go in and purchase an organization. But even to like attend a trade show, go to the American Outdoor Association. I've had plenty of guys walk around who are wanting to get into the industry and just to learn the verbiage and to shake hands and to know who the players are, to find resources like myself or like my company or the agencies that support as well as everybody that goes to trade shows. That's kind of the trade show is where the congregation point of this industry is. They happen oftentimes between October and January, depending on the state. And, most summer operators run real hard in the summer. Then they go and they do their planning during the wintertime. And they go and they meet their friends and they connect and they tell stories. And, that's the time period where you can really get to know the industry. So that's where I would
So
start.
it sounds like doing a lot of information gathering
Mm-hmm.
might be a really good first step. And then finding out about surprise opportunities. I mean, you're talking about buying a long running
Mm-hmm.
business that is already established. And my brain doesn't usually work that way. I would have immediately thought, well, how do I get the permit and I can start taking people out? You
Yeah,
know?
so there's that nuance, right? And that's one of the nuances that people typically tend to learn is the permitting system. So, I was just on a meeting with one of our Grand Canyon operators that does hiking, and the permitting and the challenges in like the Grand Canyon and the parks is a different beast from
Mm,
the permitting that would be in the Forest Service or the BLM. And if you
right.
talk to any operator, they'll say one of their biggest challenges in the startup phase is really the permitting. The three biggest challenges are going to be permitting, people, and profits. It's the P's, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, and the people is just people management at that point. But you know, there's some unique nuances with the permitting and how those exchange depending on the agency that you're trying to operate in. Then there's also like the Northeast and even like out eastern United States to do like canoe livery work or to do floats and some other different adventures there. That's a lot of private property. You don't need to have the permitting there, but you need to have access to the property to
You have to have
navigate
permission.
exactly. So, and that's a
Wow.
Midwest
Well,
issue
let's
too.
let's rewind just a little bit because some people may not realize this. I don't need a permit to go camping in the national
Hmm.
forest, right? I need to follow the local regulations for the forest because they're trying to take care of the land, okay? But I don't need a permit to go do that. But whenever I say, "Hey, John, I'm going to teach you how to go camping in the forest," and I don't charge much, but we'll go in and I'm going to set you up with all the gear and you're going to have this amazing first time primitive camping experience in the forest and I'm going to take care of you for only now I have to have a permit.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we're talking about federal lands, state lands. I don't know how many different types of permits, probably water department. I mean, you have to have the permit if you're going to make a business out of it and they only give out so many permits. So that's when you say the permit, that's what you're talking about, right?
Exactly. Yep. The effectively the license to conduct business on public lands. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the early gotchas in the dream. What would be a second gotcha in the dream if you're trying to start out?
Second, gotcha. So go check the permitting. Be comfortable with the seasonality side of it. And this is just one of
Mm,
the challenges within this industry, especially if you're coming from other industries. Um, there's I don't know of any other industry that generates 100% of its revenue in a 4 month time period, 5 month time period, right? So I work primarily historically. We've done a lot of work with like rafting outfitters. So a rafting outfit, if they're bringing on 80 employees in a season, they're going to hire 80 employees in April, and they're going to let go of 80 employees by middle of September, right?
wow.
And
Yeah.
those that the shoulders of those, if there's water, if there's droughts, if there's heat, or maybe if it's cold, that could potentially delay your season by a couple weeks. And then usually like the end of the season, especially like here in Colorado, there's a lot of fires and issues. Or if there's a drought or if there's a low snowpack, maybe the waters and maybe the trails or things get shut down early, and that's going to have an impact of
Right.
it, right? So there's a lot of quote unquote added risk associated with this industry from a weather dependency, which is uncommon to so many industries across the world, as well as the fact that if you're running only a summer season, 100% of your revenue is in a 4 month time period. That means you're in the black for 5 months, but you're in the red for your business 8 months of the year. And that can be
Mm.
unique to manage, which was really financially one of those first things that, we would get into and help bring light to a lot of those things you were mentioning earlier, and creating cadence around the financial inflows and outflows and benchmarks and pricing and gross profit margining to help make that more profitable.
Yeah, that's crazy seasonality. But you mentioned something else there, bringing 80 people on for a season and then letting them go again at the end of the season. What happens is you get people that say that a river guide's a good example. Someone's been guiding for you for a season, but this guy or gal's like, well, I want to keep working, but I don't know if I want to do this for the rest of my life. But I like being outdoors and I like your business, but you're telling me I can't work in October or December. And what ideas do you have for business owners? I mean, this is tough. Finding 80 people to come and do something for 4 months. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
absolutely. Yeah. It's a tight industry too, right? So when I say it's a
Yeah.
tight industry, the personnel that is usually being guides and things that are being hired up during that 80 during that 4 month time period, they may be transient in nature, or maybe they've got patterns where they want to be in the United States and then go down to South America, in the winter season, or maybe they want to go be a
Mm.
ski guide or
Yep.
a ski lift. So like they naturally want to be going through those transitions and working different multiple jobs. So, there's definitely some cultural patterns that, at least for the vast majority in the culture base of, the guiding outfitting scene, that is accustomed to, moving between different jobs. A lot of, the younger employees are going to be, I'd say the biggest employee base within this industry, at least within the audiences that I'm working in, is going to be between 16 to about 24 years old, right? They're going to be going to college. Maybe they need a summertime job, and, it works within the seasonality of what it is that they have going on in their life. And then, those that may not be going to school, they want to go work, like I said, wintertime jobs elsewhere. So they're open to that transition. The other thing too is, the industry, broader outdoor tourism, recreation industry is tight. So, to have relationships with, you know, like sister outfits in different, and maybe even in your region. I used to be in Durango. I was talking about that earlier. And I had a client who would recruit heavily from the local Purgatory ski resort. So he was always keeping a pulse on who
Mm.
the employees were at the ski resort. And then he would then go and hand pick guides to work in his outfit. And then that's how he was able to kind of, keep key employees on that he really, really liked. As you get further along in your career, it gets into the element of career guiding, right? So you go from just being a seasonal guide to wanting to make a lifetime of it. And right now within the industry, there's an interest for, really strong, qualified employees who would otherwise leave the industry to go get big kid jobs, to keep them retained. And in order to keep them retained, we want to, build up their skill sets and their just broader aptitudes beyond just rafting or beyond just the guiding component, and becoming, like strong managers, and then to create year-round positions for those individuals. So the industry is trying to do that and transition more and more into that, which has typically historically been kind of for more of the bigger operations, but more of the mom and pops are trying to figure out ways to retain really quality talent by hiring them year-round as well.
You know, it's interesting. One of the companies I worked for many, many years ago, one of their main mottos was hire and develop great people.
Uh-huh.
And it sounded good in an interview when they say, we hire and develop great people, because you think, oh man, I've got a future here. It's harder to do that, I think, than it is to say that.
Oh, so hiring great talent, absolutely. Especially retaining great talent, especially right now when, Gallup just came out with their most recent report saying that, they had their second ever drop in employee engagement and employee happiness rates. So, there's some definitely challenges in the workforce right now when it comes to retaining really qualified employees. Um, this is one of those things that like we lean into within the Eddy specifically, in identifying who are those talented individuals that eat, breathe your outfit, who share the same core values with you, that have the same kind of drive and passion and interest to help your organization work smart, have fun, and make money. So I'm always leaning into resources like the Gallup Q12 as one. I really like some of Patrick Lencioni's books, Five Dysfunctions of a Team. We talk a decent amount in terms of the business management side of things and being a strong leader. Servant leadership books are really, really good for that.
Well, we had to take a slight break there, and we kind of lost our train of thought. So I'm going to start with a new question, Zeb. You mentioned the pandemic, that it impacted the outdoor industry and your business, but I don't know if everyone knows how much of an impact it was. The really surprising things happened. And then that'll lead into where are we now? But explain the impact to the outdoor industry in general and also to outfitters and guides that the pandemic had.
Yeah, so the pandemic, I mean, when it hit in 2019, everybody didn't know what was going to happen, right? So I had created an online Facebook group called the Outside In Crowd. And, there was a lot of engagement, and outfitters were rallying together to try and come up with little small strategy things on like managing their buses and managing things. And it was an exciting time for sure. Well, then there was all of the like social distancing and, get outside messaging that happened. Also, like international travel stopped, but people were like sitting around at home and they were wanting to adventure, and there were like open states and things. And man, the industry just ended up booming when it came to revenue. And there was just banner years. I mean, pretty much every outfitter, so many of the outfit industry had high revenue numbers. They also had all the PPP and the idle funding that came in, and there was a lot of, like rural, like funding that was given to a lot of these businesses. So they ended up turning into be a very financially strong season for these outfitters. And that trend happened for about 2 seasons, 2 summer seasons. And then after that, we've started to see a decline in terms of passenger volumes, and that could be because traveling is opening up internationally. People are going to other entertainment efforts. There's a lot supporting, why there isn't as many people coming in and experiencing the great outdoors from a paid service standpoint. But I'm happy to see that this year in 25 we're starting to see some stability from this big pop and drop. And that a lot of the booking numbers are pretty consistent with the prior 2 years. And I think it'll be even a little bit of a rebound this year is our prediction with what we just put out in our annual scout report a couple weeks ago, to think that there should be a little bit of an increase in national passenger customer volume compared to last year, and hopefully echo more where 2024 was at, or 23.
I talked to people that had businesses that sold outdoor gear. And when they saw those banner years during, the COVID time period, 2020, 2021, then they based their inventory purchases on that. And then 2022, 2023 came around and they couldn't sell the stuff.
Yeah.
It was something else.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And also, if you talk about like the shortages that happen with the supply issues and supply chains and, the demand for outdoor gear. I know we ended up buying an RV, a little camper in that time period too. And the lot was just bare. And then 2 years later, the lot's totally full. And I actually just heard word that the company that I bought our RV from went out of business this last year too.
Wow.
I don't know what the specifics were on why that is, but a fellow RVer told me, he's like, oh yeah, that business is no longer there anymore. Now it's just an empty lot. I was like, oh, that's a bummer. So
It's difficult in unprecedented times to be able to predict what's going to happen. But I think especially as a young business owner, maybe slightly inexperienced business owner, new business, trying to get used to an industry and things like seasonality, but then you get these long cycle curves, things like economic cycles or pandemics or things like that. It makes a lot of sense for businesses to try to have a longer viewpoint built into their goals and their business plans so that they can weather some of this stuff. I imagine that your company could do a lot to help with that. Having gone through the pandemic experience, now you probably could offer some wisdom.
well, if you don't have something you're shooting for, you're never going to hit it, right? So, to have a
Yeah,
target and to have a goal in mind and to have a vision, it's a positive from many different levels. It gives you purpose and it gives you something to aspire to. But especially if you're hiring employees and trying to grow up managers, that's what we were talking about before we had to take that break.
right.
You know, people and young employees and old employees are too, they're inspired by the vision and they want to know that they're putting in for something that's good and that they can get behind what it is that you're going after. So, one thing that we do within our organization, we do this in our Eddy group, we do this in our one-on-one client relationships, is we call it the multi-vision. So it's taking your business from multiple angles. What are your interests personally, professionally, and financially as the owner? What is it that you want for the business? And then the same questions for your managers as well as your key employees. And it's a really fun experience in that, so many people get to lay out what it is that they want to accomplish for themselves as well as for their organization in a this year, next year, and few year out time period. And it always is inspiring to hear how even if people aren't talking about the same thing, they're not actively communicating this within their organization, there's a lot of a similar like vision and values that kind of come out of it. And then from there, we help organizations then set key metrics and things to support and basically monitor that transition, which gets into that longer aggregated view as you're talking about, especially in this industry. And there's so many seasonalities and there's so many peaks and valleys that can happen. But to like stabilize that and to treat business like a marathon versus a sprint, it can be challenging, but it's definitely reduces anxiousness for sure.
I have two thoughts in my mind that we've got to get to before we run out of time. One is, you alluded to it already. You have a college student who has to go get the grown-up job, right? But in Durango, at Fort Lewis, in Gunnison, at Western Colorado University, and other places around the state, they offer degree programs, things like outdoor leadership, outdoor education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of the people that just love adventure sports, they get those degrees, and for 4 years, maybe they are the raft guide, right? Maybe they help during the school year on the weekends teaching ski lessons or something too. But when they graduate, it's tough. I'll just say it. It's tough. You have a 4-year degree, you want a grown-up salary or income, and what do you do with those degrees? I mean, this is your industry, and these are the businesses you work with. So what would be your recommendation for people that are headed down that way?
We've talked a lot about the consumer side, like the outfitting, the experiential side of the industry. There's also like the public federal, state associations that allow people to get out into it. We haven't even mentioned like CPW locally, right? One of my really good friends here at Gunnison, he manages the hatchery. So like there's a good avenue too for individuals that.
So Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, sorry, CPW, Colorado Parks and
Okay,
Wildlife.
CPW.
Yep. So that's one of the examples. There are a lot of associations that support these organizations. There's it's SORP. It's Outdoor Recreation Professionals, Society of Outdoor Recreation Professionals, I believe. You have to check that one. But they have a lot of information and content out there about, like economic development alliances who try and promote these outdoor rec spaces as well. So outdoor recreation is huge. If people want to get out of the rigmarole of being an attorney or being an engineer and want to do something that gets them outside, there's a lot of opportunity there.
I think that what's interesting about it, at least from my perspective, and I'm no expert. I've been dabbling in the outdoor industry for a lot of years, but from my perspective, the path forward is less obvious. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's that, if you want to become a doctor, you have to get a medical degree, you do a residency, set up a practice or join a practice or become a specialist. Your path. It's well established. And most vocations are like that. You kind of know the path because it's been done this way for decades or centuries. But in the outdoor industry, I don't know. It's harder to know the path.
Yeah, and
I think you really have to do your homework.
I would agree with that, and also say, one of the core things about this business is at the root of it is passion, right? Like it's a passion fueled business. There's so many of those other professions you talked about. You go and you work and you generate enough income to support a family and to buy a house and to get a boat, and then they end up leading long term into depressions and other kind of issues in states and things, just because there isn't the passion or the purpose that's really kind of there. But when you go to these trade shows and we're interacting with so many outfitters that we work with, as well as the guides, there is just such a great love for the outdoors and such a love to connect people with it. And that's what, and it's hard too. That's the other thing too, is it's a really hard industry to get into, to make work, to sustain, to be able to manage. And there's a lot of sacrifice within that. But, that grit that comes along with that challenge and with that passion is really, I think, the fuel behind it. It's not a highly profitable business by any means. If somebody wants to get in and purchase, and, you're not going to make your millions outfitting, is something I hear all the time. But what it will do is it will provide gratifying experiences, and it will let you be able to get exposed to the outdoors and get connected with people and with, nature and all the great things. One of the people in the Eddy said, you can't put passion into business, but you can put business into passion. So that's one of those things that we try and incorporate within our expertise, being service professionals with business backgrounds and business expertise, to help these outfits take their passion and make it a lucrative, profitable, wealth-generating business, not just for the owners, but for those career guides and those managers that want to make the long run of it. Because historically, people would sacrifice the financial wealth and the financial future for being able to be outdoors. And, we're just learning that's not the most sustainable.
So we were talking about long business cycles, and then shorter ones like seasonality. But long business cycles, one that we're currently experiencing, I'd really like to hear your feedback on this. During the COVID experience, there was a lot of money printed, a lot of money passed out, and I actually did a little bit of research, and it was the biggest growth in the U.S. money supply in the history of our nation, and they increased the money supply by 75%, almost doubled the amount of cash in the economy. And basic economics is that if you double the cash, you double the prices eventually, because the prices come up to meet the cash supply. And we could get into all the debates between the different types of economic opinions, and that was more of an Austrian economics opinion, but it does prove out And what we have found in our nation is that we can do things like raise interest rates. It slows the economy and it slows how fast that inflation hits, but it still gets there eventually. So I bring that up because prior to 2020, we had about half the money supply. And we all know what happened with the inflation cycle since then. We got as high as 9% inflation in the CPI, and
CP.
real inflation depended on what you were spending your money on and what business you were in, what your industry was. I can tell you it was not 9% for most people. It was way above that. But that said, we'll just keep on cruising past that. If you look at the cumulative inflation rates over the last 5 years, things are
Oh
expensive.
yeah, I think.
And this is crushing some industries because if they raise prices enough to afford all of their supply liabilities, then the customers are like, "You kidding me? I can't pay that." Not only that, but if you're an outfitter, how many families are going to say, "Yeah, let's skip that part of the vacation this year, or maybe we won't do the raft trip," or you see what I'm
Oh
saying?
yeah, yeah, no.
Speak to what the industry is doing. I mean, how do we weather these kinds of
Yeah,
times?
so this is one of those things that we're leaning into to provide content and to really challenge the status quo and managing it. So, I was a lucrative piece, or our company was a lucrative piece, in raising those prices in response and creating better profit margins, gross profit margins specifically, in the early stages of these inflation marks, right? Defining what are those broader objectives, those year-end goals, and backing into what we call as like a need-based price for trips and activities and things, right? So, looking at what the overheads are, looking at what the trip costs are, and being really honest with yourselves on what's needed to charge a price. Well, that got things corrected in a good position the first couple years of the drop off in revenue, the dropping demand and customer volume. But to your point, the last 3 years, last 4 years, I did a presentation on this at AO. We looked at the accumulated inflation impact, and it was something like 33% compounded inflation over that few year time period. So here we
Yeah,
have revenue going down because passenger volumes are going down. We're softening that decline with increased rates. However, there's some resistance this year to those higher price points. It is getting outside of
sure.
the everyman price point for sure. But at that same time, we're now really starting to feel the impact of these increasing costs, right? And you look at outfitters, and there's a lot of overhead depending on the type of outfitting they do. Insurance costs have skyrocketed the last few years. So there's a lot of non-negotiable, fixed expenses that are just climbing and climbing and climbing. So where does this fit in the middle? And this is what we're really leaning into this year, and I think the content that we're gonna go into this fall is challenging the status quo in terms of what we're doing with that overhead personnel primarily. How is it that we can lean more into management and to change the method and thinking about what a manager is within the industry. Historically, it's somebody that's been given the task of scheduling or the task of equipment management. It's more like glorified guides with more tasks to do that give them a management title. But historically, it hasn't been like the people management and the development of purpose and businessy, what managerial skills, right? So,
Yeah.
one of the things that we're encouraging to do is we do those projections, we do those longer term projections in terms of the growth to still hit those revenue marks, knowing that we have these increasing costs, but to improve the company culture to be less about just the being outside, the river rat, grungy quote unquote guide, to being a profession that gives you good skills that can be transferable across life in terms of like development and personal growth, business growth, getting their mindset from it's about me and my exchange and the dollar amount to it's about we as a team that is providing a good for an industry and moving the people forward, right? It's a big kind of shift, and we're working out the nuances, but I think we can lean more into that management group and educating them about business inner workings and financial inner workings to drive future profitability for these small mom and pop operations. But it changes a behavior. There's a behavioral change in challenging the status quo on how we're handling that overhead. Because on the P&L, that's the only one that you have capacity right now to make cuts to. And so many operators, like the person you were talking about earlier, the owner who doesn't want to be handling all that anymore, has had to delegate that out to managers. So how do we get the managers generating, the income to basically afford the long-term jobs that they want? Well, we have to educate them and give them the resources and the tools to take on that monkey themselves and get after it.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say, if I got this right, you're trying to have an approach that empowers people in the organization to actually gain more skills, to develop more in their careers, while reducing the overhead for the organization.
Yep. And we're seeing it work too, which has been really cool.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's what.
Well, it's neat. I mean, it provides opportunities for people that are kind of up and coming in the industry, right? It provides more opportunity for them because they're like, oh, well, if I take on these responsibilities and learn these things and get these skill sets, then maybe I do have more of a future. And in so doing, trying to hang on to the slim margin that the businesses have.
Well, and that's just it too, right? People oftentimes leave the industry because, they are having kids. They need to get a house. Like, they need to do the life stuff. If they're not going to continue to live in a van their whole life, like, there's a need to level that up. So, we're creating opportunities to provide them the financial capacities to afford that personally, to keep them in the industry, to retain that really strong, good quality and that really strong talent. So I mentioned how, it sounds great in theory, but does it really happen in practice? Yeah, absolutely it happens in practice. Go talk to our client base, look at the outfitters on our website, and hear their stories on the transformations that they're making. It starts with sharing and introducing them into thinking about the big business stuff, giving them exposure in the multi-vision, educating them on the true ins and outs of running a business, mentoring them and guiding them. And then we also have key things that we lean into within our toolbox on identifying those key employees that we want to replicate, using things to replicate those individuals specifically, but then also like qualify, how's our work culture transitioning? So, educating and empowering managers and guides to, reduce their spend to create more funds available for employees. That's where we get the additional funds available for bonuses or for benefits that they may want. It also, before we relinquish that and distribute it accordingly, we may be building up cash reserves, but educating employees on the needs for those long-term cash reserves so that they're aware, even though I'm really working hard this year at reducing our spend and getting these revenue numbers, we're really not going to see the benefit of that 2 years from now. But because we've laid out the 2-3 year plan, I can get behind the purpose and the mission that we're getting after. So I'm okay delaying that, gratification of a bonus payout until then. But then it becomes more about the business and the why, what we're here for, than just that about me exchange that so many of the employee base right now and the great disengagement, if you would call it, is facing.
Zeb, I'm getting a vibe here that I want to highlight. There are a lot of people out there trying to run a outdoor-based company, and they're hearing what you're saying, and they're like, wow, that's business talk, and I'm a river rat. And so the vibe I'm getting is that your consulting services can really help. And it's not because people aren't smart. It's because they've not learned it yet. You know, you've gone to school for it. You have a company that specializes in it, and you can help these other companies wrap around the business end of the business. You know, and these are difficult times. You know, with inflation and all the pressures that we're having. I think people are going to have to work a lot smarter if they're going to succeed and continue to enjoy doing what they love to do. So, I applaud you, what Zebulon LLC is doing, and what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Well, thank you, Curt. I very much appreciate it. They can reach out to me directly. We have our team email, which is team@zebulonllc.com. That will get an email in front of myself and Corey and Kayla. That's a great avenue. You go to our website, zebulonllc.com, take a look at it, and reach out. I mean, we're a small organization, and we really are here to help anybody within the industry who wants to work smart, have fun, and make money. We know that we're not here to serve everybody in the curve of customer base. We're usually working with the early adopters because we are asking to challenge the status quo. So if these things resonate with you, and you want to step out to this level, and you want to put that foot forward and be part of this broader transformation, I invite it for sure.
Well, I'd like to throw this out there too. I'm all about adventure sports. You know what doing the adventures can do to help people, and I believe they really do help people. It enriches our lives, but it also enriches our wisdom, and our experiences lend strength for other experiences later in life, and it just goes on and on. Connecting with nature. I mean, I can talk for hours about this stuff. You are supporting that industry that makes these opportunities possible. That puts you on the good side of the fight, and I appreciate the fact that you're out there helping to preserve adventure for the rest of us. And that's kind of the way that I see it.
My pleasure, you bet. So. Yeah, if we wanted to be making money, we'd be going elsewhere, but it's not about the money for us.
Right. Well, that's cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the Adventure Sports Podcast today, Zeb. It was enlightening for me. And for the listeners out there, maybe this will stir up some ideas for you, or maybe you say, oh, I could use some help, or wow, I need to learn more about that. Maybe your dream of someday doing what you love and keeping it fun, you realize that there is a path forward there. So I hope that the information was useful, and thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.